So it's very exciting to be able to collaborate together. The future really is the topic of today's conversation. And so we have this question: will Gen AI see the return of architectural phenomenology? I intentionally phrased this as a question and not as a statement, because I believe that no one knows the answer yet, not even the people working at OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google. Everybody's still trying to figure out this question of what will AI do and what will the future hold for us. So I'm leaving it as a question for now. And this lecture this afternoon, we're going to start to unpick that question in order to identify some answers. I'll show you some of the things that our students are doing at Curtin University, and I'll show you some of the work that I'm doing in my own research, in my own practice. And hopefully that will start to help us get an understanding of this question. I don't think it will answer the question, not yet, but hopefully it'll start to develop the conversation further. So a little bit about me. My name is Chris Muber. I'm the Director of Discipline, so the head of the Bachelor of Architecture degree at Curtin University. My specializations are in digital technology, of course, and also in speculative design, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we get to that place. I've been teaching at Curtin University for 11 years, and over time I have developed an understanding. Originally, I was working in practice at the same time as teaching, and the more time I spent teaching, the more time I've got into research, the more I've continued to pursue this path of digital technologies and asking questions about the future. Last year, I gave a talk in 2023 in November here at Daejeon in this room, and it's been a long and exciting year. My daughter will be born soon at the end of this year, so it's been a very important year for me and an exciting time, but it's also been a big year for the whole world. Will AI take our jobs was the title of last year's lecture, because that was the question I was getting asked every day, particularly from students and parents and students that want to know whether or not architecture is still a valid profession. So we look back on the year that it's been and some of the things that artificial intelligence has been used for in our profession. So concept making, and most recently we had an international exhibition by a famous architect, Liam Young, and he's been using artificial intelligence to ask one question, which is, what does the future of the world look like if all 10 billion people live in one city and occupy the same space? And he uses artificial intelligence to answer that question and visualize it. We have another architect, Honus Gunn, who is working in the product design space for big companies like Adidas and Nike. And he's using artificial intelligence to take data, something that maybe architects aren't as familiar with because we're not software engineers, but to turn it into something formal, something three-dimensional, and something tangible. We see big companies, for us the biggest company in Australia, Hassel, doing things like site and plan forming. So as part of the development process, they're taking big data, lots of information, and trying to conceptualize how best to use the site. We've seen perhaps the most famous architects in the world for form generating, Zaha Hadid, Frank Gehry architects, have been using artificial intelligence to help them generate forms. They already generate forms in their business. That's what they do. They're form architects, but they're now using AI as part of their form generation. And finally, we see data simulation turned into something very much tangible and very exciting. And we'll look at this last one now, Neri Oxman, who is a famous architect out of America. This is her most recent project, and I'll just play a video. This is just me scrolling through her website on a most recent project called Eden, and we'll see very much how artificial intelligence is integrated into her design process. And so we're starting with very similar things. We have a brief, we have information, we're trying to visualize and understand that information in terms of planning. From planning, we start some form understanding, we're doing some conceptual thinking, we evolve that conceptual thinking with visualization. Here's a big change, 60,000 iterations in the development of the form. thanks to artificial intelligence. We then continue with optimizing our building, testing, seeing what we could turn it into. We come back to traditional methods. We have perspectives, we have drawings, sketching, figuring out what this tower is going to be, rendering, placing it into the site context of New York, sections, plans, diagrams, then back into AI to take all that data again, optimize the building, make sure it's going to work in the site, back to drawing, back to making models, beautiful model as well. Then we continue to explore, we go back into architectural drawing, we develop, we understand materials, and we produce beautiful spaces and experiences. So the point I make here is that it's still architecture. We can see as part of the process, while we are getting perhaps more detail in the architecture, 60,000 iterations before we get to the final part, we still fundamentally control the process as architects. We're still controlling what the outcome is going to be. So then the question becomes, well, what's next? If this is 2023 to 2024, this is the last year since I gave my last lecture, what's going to come between now and hopefully the next lecture in 2025 when I come back? In order to answer that question, I want to talk you through 3 stories. The first 2 stories will be what our students are working on at Curtin University with me, and then I'll go through some of my own creative practice. In this first story, we look at the idea of AI-enabled agency, and a key part there is AI-enabled. So the AI is allowing the students to start to think about this very, very important idea, agency. And it's something that we're all going to need to question as AI becomes part of our life. Agency means to have control, to have ownership, to be responsible for, to think for, to work for. As architects, we have this huge responsibility to deliver something of value to our clients. Often we work for people that we will never meet, that we will never see, and yet this is going to be a building that they spend time in every day. It might even be a place that they live in. So we have a huge social responsibility to ensure we're delivering something of value to them. That is our agency as architects. So AI, in this instance, in this particular studio, is something that allows students to think about that concept of agency, to think about who they're designing for and why it's important. So the brief for this studio is that the students need to think about producing an architecture that contributes rather than consumes. So the big problem with architecture, as we know, is it consumes a lot of resources. So if we're going to continue making new things, our argument is that it should also contribute. Not only should it be net zero, it should be giving something, it should be adding something. Otherwise, why do we do it? So our agency for the students is to contribute. They need to think about a group in the community, and they need to design in such a way that it gives them value. It works towards their needs and it helps them in some way. This particular student is looking at the idea of fear. She wants to construct an architecture that allows people to face their phobias, that allows them to go into the space, experiencing it, and then get past that fear and move on. The example here we look at, she's talking about the idea or the fear of reptiles. And so she takes artificial intelligence and she says, the reptile idea, how can I turn this into something tangible so that people can engage with it, interact with it as an architecture, and then slowly get past that fear. So we start with artificial intelligence to produce imagery. Then we go back to sketching. Then from sketching, we go into modeling. Modeling back to sketching, more AI, and then into the 3D development. We then have this concept of agency. This is an architecture that responds, that contributes rather than consumes. It helps people with something. In this case, fear of reptiles. We repeat this multiple times. We have a fear of asymmetry. We have an outcome. We have a fear of claustrophobia. We have an outcome. We have a fear of trypophobia, or holes, eyes, things like that. And we have quite a beautiful outcome from this student. The next phase of the studio is they have to turn this into an architectural sequence. a journey that enables people to work towards that issue that they're facing. For some people, it might be fear. For other people, they might have a disability, and for them, it's about getting access to education or play or something, whatever that agency might be. In this case, the student's concept is that the opposite of fear and being controlled by that fear is freedom or enlightenment. And so she wants to create a space that once they get to, they feel that sense of freedom. And so we see that in this journey that the student has created. She creates a sequence of spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the final outcome being that freedom, that moment of release. We have trypophobia, claustrophobia, heterotopia, asymmetrophobia, and then finally enlightenment. The final outcome for the students is then to create a 3D model of part of the architecture. So the issue we face, and if we pause from this for a second, the issue we face with artificial intelligence is that we grow more and more focused with image. And this is not only to do with artificial intelligence, we can also look to social media. Our focus has been more and more on the image and what the architecture looks like, which means we focus less on the function. We focus less on quality. We focus less on whether it works for people. So the idea of this studio's final moment is that we make a 1:1 scale, something that we can reach out and touch, and hold, and interact with. We cross the bridge between what is fundamentally intangible, artificial intelligence on the screen, and what is tangible, something we can touch, something we can hold, something that we can engage with. And so the student comes full circle. They have this first idea. They have artificial intelligence to help them visualize what that idea might be, but we're still in the same problem. We still just have an image. So from there, we must get more tangible. We must focus on the exterior. We must focus on the experience, on the agency, and how that might tell people. And we do that with a physical entity. Because as architects, we are responsible for physical things. We live in the physical world. We construct physical things. And so the full spectrum of design in this process is artificial intelligence helps us to deal with agency so that we can have a more sophisticated result at the end. If we have a look at some more student examples now, I think we can see beautiful spaces come out of this. But if we look at some of the other student examples, we'll see a very similar outcome theme. So this student is interested in the idea of relaxation, of helping with mental health for people suffering from trauma. And so she creates a sequence of spaces. The first is to breathe. We're using AI to help understand what that might be like. We sketch, we model. We use AI, we model. Same process. This time is to connect with people, to rest, to find Zen, and then to turn that into an architecture. This student creates a response which is sitting in the landscape. And as you go to this place and you go through this place, you can have this beautiful, ephemeral journey. Then the final outcome, once again, is this tangible sensorial quality at 1:1 scale. Another student, this student's agency is about exploration and play for children. So they're interested in how we can turn a playground into something different, how we can make this a very tangible, tactile and experiential quality for young people as they play. Same process. Sketching, AI, model development, AI, sketching, model development. And we do this multiple times in order to develop that experience. Outcome, 3D printed model. One more, this student very much exploring qualities of healing, of chronic pain, and from helping people to get past pain and feel better. Very intense in terms of their documentation, in terms of the qualities, but still with similar outcomes, still with the similar intent and the same pathway. What? And there's the final outcomes. So the crux of this story is that you might assume from using artificial intelligence that everything will start to feel the same. Everything will start to become generalized. And if we're facing one challenge, i.e. a studio brief, that all the students' work will start to look the same, all the architects' work might start to be the same, and our thinking might be the same. Hopefully you've seen from the work here, with just 4 examples, that they are fundamentally different. Some are poetic and beautiful and ephemeral. Others are very intense and graphic, heavy and technical. So the student is still in control. The student is still developing the outcomes. Maybe the only difference here is that through artificial intelligence, the outcome itself is more sophisticated. The outcome itself is more rooted in something tangible, in something that people can reach out and hold, something experiential. I would argue that because the students have access to AI, they were able to get to a point like this faster. The next story I want to talk about is AI-enabled, keywords again, speculation. The idea of a fictional architecture or using storytelling in order to develop architecture. So for us, speculative architecture or speculative fiction involves getting past or transcending the limitations of today in order to explore the possibilities of tomorrow. This is our role as innovators, as creatives, as architects, is to challenge what we see now in order to think about where we might go in the future. And this is the challenge of our students in this particular studio campus. What they have to do is respond to a brief in a competition scenario. So the students are given a question. The question is, what will the future of politics and power look like in 50 years from now? So 2074, what will architecture that responds to the needs of people look like 50 years from now? What does politics look like? What does society look like? What does technology look like in the future? And how does architecture respond to that? In order to get there, students look at 2 different typologies. They look at films and creating fiction through film, storyboarding, and film production. They also look at the game design and how we can tell a story through games. In order to get there, the students use the software Unreal Engine, and they develop a real, tangible, 3-dimensional environment that they can explore. So this is where all the students start. They start with identifying a story. They start with posing questions about what the future will be so that they can explore that. We use storyboarding, which we borrow as a language from film, and then we develop an architectural experience from that. Where AI comes in, and I apologize for the blurry screen, where AI comes in is the very, very rapid development of what those architectural concepts might be. So we're still thinking, we're still coming up with ideas, and it's probably all in here, it's probably as a written dialogue, but it's still very fledgling, very young, very junior in terms of its development. But then as AI comes in, we can get very quickly, one day, to very sophisticated ideas about what these things might be, which then leads to a stronger architectural design. If you look at the difference between this and this, we can see the growth in sophistication by using artificial intelligence as the medium between the 2 levels. This is all still at the first week of design. Then from there, we go back into our traditional methods. We're using modeling, we're doing sketching, we're developing the style. We take that into Unreal Engine, we turn that into an architectural storyboard. This group's concept was that we live in 2 worlds in the future. 99% of people live in dystopia. They live in a world that is unchanged from where it is now. It just continues on the path we're on. Global warming takes hold. 99% of people can't afford to buy water, all of these things. Whereas the other 1% live in a very beautiful world, surrounded by landscape, and everything's perfect. Sounds familiar? Here we see the students run through that world. They've created this in Unreal Engine, and we'll turn that into a film. And I'll show the film in just a moment. Okay, let's watch that. Okay, I want to show you another example now. I won't go through the full storyboard and the sketching and the production, but I want you to see a second team so that you have something to compare with and you can see the difference in how AI is used for both. That's on. How about that? It's okay. Just soon. Because we did really. We
Yeah. You look double to it on. Then yeah. But the TV. What this be the thing is, but
Yeah.
the
So the key takeaway for this, hopefully, which is clear, is that once again, even though we're on the same brief, the students have fundamentally different projects. And the outcome of this is very much of the experience. So they're speculating on the future of what architecture could be. They can talk about anything to do with society, with technology, with healthcare, with government, but they're focused on the experience of the architecture. They're thinking about what the qualities are in terms of their tactility. So again, we're coming back to that idea of phenomenology and experience. The final story I want to talk to you about is AI-enabled phenomenology in my own research practice, in a recent competition that I did with my collaborator, Isaac Mokwon. But we start always in the same way. We start with sketching, with talking, with coffee, with wine, with reading and thinking. We talk about philosophy, we talk about ideas, and we talk about mostly the end user. We try and place ourselves in the position of the person who's going to be using the architecture we're designing. So we're thinking from a phenomenological point of view, what it's like to be there, inhabiting that space. We always start with the primary reading. For us, this competition was hospice for the terminally ill. Our job was to design a space for people just before they're about to die that would be beautiful, that would be joyful, that would connect with their family, that would be a nice place to end. The primary reading for this competition for us was modern hospice design, which came with three main criteria. The first one being that you must be connected to nature. The second was you must still be connected to the city. And the third was you must be able to get absolutely anywhere in the building while in a bed. So wheelchair might not be enough. Some people might not even be able to leave the bed. So you need to be able to design for the bed. That came very quickly to our response. In Western Australia, perhaps the most important part of our nature and our topology, our typology, is our proximity to the coast. We have a very strange urban structure. So we have the same population as Daejeon, 1.5 million, but instead of being densely populated like you are here, we're spread out all the way along the coast, 100 kilometers north and 100 kilometers south along the edge of the coastline. Just like you can see in this left-hand image here, very low density housing, 2 or 3 stories maximum, all the way along the edge of the coastline, because people want to live near the beach. They want to live near the water. So artificial intelligence for us in our first starting point was thinking about that idea. What is some sort of structure that's going to sit out on the water? How are we going to get people out there? How are we going to be able to watch the sunset in the evening? That was critical for us. That also identified 2 sites. So along the Western Australian coast, we have a lot of beaches where the waves are really powerful and they can crush you and they can send you out to sea. We do also happen to have a collection of reef along an area called Trig. What that reef does is it slows the waves down by the time they make it to the shore. And you can see it in here. There's dark parts of the reef and then the light areas, that's where the waves will come in nice and soft. So we also wanted to be in proximity to the reef to make sure the water was calm for people who are ill. That moves on to our first site visit. And there are 4 elements of the site which we're responding to. The first one is this idea of deep time, which comes from the stone. We're thinking of that person, and if we're in that perspective and our life is going to end soon, we want to be surrounded by things that are connected to a time that was way before us and will still be there way, way after us. The stone has been there hundreds of thousands of years, maybe millions of years, and so we like the idea of connecting it to that stone so that time is more intangible. Time, we feel like we're connecting into something that will still be there once we're gone. The next part you'll see here, which is really important, is people use this coastline for community. It's where you walk, you run, you jog, you meet with friends, you have coffee, you go along the edge of the water as a big part of the Perth lifestyle if you live in the West. That was important. But what you'll also see here is the site has quite a large drop. So dropping down from that walkway down to the level of the water, we've got about 2.5, 3 stories of drop, which means our architecture can sit inside here without disrupting that view. So people will still be able to walk along this edge without our architecture impacting that. Coming back to that idea of contribute rather than consume, we want to contribute, we want to add value to this area. Then in this image we see the most important part maybe is the idea of family, coming here, enjoying the beach, having a beautiful day, and just being together. Finally, this is the essence of our design, is this concept of the rocks protecting you, water coming in, nice, calm ocean, and just sitting there as an ocean pool. The ocean pool then becomes the concept for our exploration in artificial intelligence. So we like this idea of the calm water, we like this idea of the limestone, thousands, tens of thousands year old stone, and we like this idea of not doing too much. All we really want to do with the architecture is just enhance what's already there, provide shelter over this beautiful calm ocean pool. And so we're exploring the idea of the ocean pool. What comes out of that is this idea of hydrotherapy. Part of the brief for a terminally ill hospice is that you need to provide physiotherapy for the people if they're sore, if they're in pain. What better way to achieve that therapy than through relaxing and floating in the water? No matter what level you're at, even if you're in a bed, you can still have someone lift you into the water and float in the beautiful salt water. So that then becomes part of resolving that brief criteria as well. We've moved from our AI development into sketching over the site and figuring out how the building's going to work. The site itself offers a geometry. So the way the rocks are formed, they post this circle in the water. So we start with that. Then we're responding very much to that idea of community. We want to be part of that community. So at the moment, we have this walking trail that comes to here and then stops at the rocks, and then another one from the other side which comes to here and stops to the rocks. So our architectural response is going to be continuing that path and then also adding new lines to that path so that we can bring community down into the project and make sure people still feel a part of life. And then we go back and forth with sketching. We're working in AutoCAD to continue to develop the site, and then back into AI again to make sure it's all still working. As we can see here, we're testing out this narrative of what it's like to occupy that space, to have the water come in and sit in these calm ocean pools. From there, we go back to the site again. So it's an important part of the phenomenology for me to test if it works. So I'm standing at the edge of the reef. It's very cold, so you see me jump in a second. There, yes. But the water is still very calm. So it's being broken up by the reefs. And if you go further in, there's going to be more reefs and the water will be even calmer again. So we have that test, we have that confirmation that this is possible. What we notice also through this test is that the more reef interacts with the water, the more the water will slow down for people. And so that becomes part of our design. We want to create a sequence of ocean pools, which you can pull through, and I'll talk about in a second. So this is the design response. You can see that we have people walking up here, we have access to the urban structure, cars going past. We have these paths that come down, and now we've completed this path and pulled it back up. Another really important part of the beach culture in Western Australia is the shower facilities where you can shower off all the salt and the sand after you finish with your family or you finish surfing, and a kiosk where you can go and get an ice cream, have some chips, a hot dog, whatever, with your family before you continue going. So the first thing for us is to introduce a new shower that wasn't there and the kiosk to bring people down here, which then activates this part of the site and brings people through this area. The other side of that is a more refined version of the same thing. So we have a restaurant. We want to make sure that not only we're coming here for people to pass away, but we're also coming here for people to be able to connect with that loved one a year later, 10 years later, whatever. Part of my own family and Isaac, my collaborator's family, is we like to go somewhere to celebrate a loved one years after they've passed away. And so for us, we like this idea of a restaurant sitting out over the water where you could go to have a coffee, have a drink with your family, remember your friend, remember your family member, watch the sunset. So this becomes the public side of the structure, which splits over to this side here. What we wanted to do was maintain what is already there. So underneath here, the rocks, this is where people with children, they come and they go fishing, and they fish on the water here. So what we've done is we've elevated the architecture to sit over the top, which cantilevers out to provide them shelter. And behind that, underneath that, is a wall. The wall then also provides them shelter from the wind, so they can stay here fishing even in winter. On the back of the wall, we have privacy for our ocean pools. The ocean comes in here, it's collected in here, and that is the full brunt of the water, so without any regulation. And then underneath here, which I'll show in a second, we have a series of arches which are increasingly higher in the water level. So if you want to sit all the way out in the water and have all of the flow of the water, you can, or if you want to sit further back and just have a nice and calm bath in the middle of it, you can too. And that all happens underneath. Out here we have our spiritual space, which is a part of the brief criteria. For us, the most important part, and thinking about agency again, was that it was a spiritual place for everyone. Regardless of religion, regardless of spirituality, it needed to be something that anyone can enjoy. Age, gender, doesn't matter. They can go out to this space. So we stripped away anything with any connotations to religion, spirituality, and made it about nature. So for us, this is about floating out over the ocean and just looking out at the sky, looking out at the uninterrupted view of the horizon as the moment of spirituality. And this just floats out here, completing the circle of the geometry. In the upper levels of the building here, which is floating above, we have the psychotherapy area. For us, again, we didn't want psychotherapy to be a one-on-one session with two people looking at each other, one a doctor, one a person who's about to pass away. So we created a sequence of cells which face down to the water here, which have a library behind them. So instead of facing each other, you sit side by side and you look out to the water, and maybe you read a book together or you have a conversation together, but it's just about connecting with the water, looking at the people playing and being a part of life. On the other side, we have the doctors and nurses facilities and the ramps down into the space below. So that even if you're in a bed, you get down to the hydrotherapy and the spiritual space. The final part is at the top here where we have our lookout over the water. Again, if someone has passed away, a family member or loved one, we don't want the last thing to do is that moment. We want to be able to go upstairs, sit, watch the sunset, and then just remember them, celebrate their life, maybe have a drink with friends, family, whatever. So we create this final moment that you should go up to. It's also directly connected to the pathway out here. So people walking past can come and use it as a lookout, or maybe a year later you want to come back and remember this moment, you can. So this is the project, and if we look through it now, we see how it works. We're collecting people off of that main level, we're bringing them down, and we split the public side with the private side along here. We have our ocean pools, which are graded, so most amount of water, least amount of water. We have our ramp system getting everybody down, cafe, kiosk, restaurant, dining, lookout over the top, and then so cellar libraries for psychotherapy treatment and nerve as well. The core concepts which come back to our reading and come back from that early AI development is that the landscapers lead the design. All we're really doing is we're putting something over the top to provide shelter. The rest of it is just the landscape and just us supporting that through architecture. Remember, agency in contributing rather than it's giving. The next phase, nourish and nurture, comes from in our culture in the Wajaknima, which is the Aboriginals country from where we're from. The idea of taking care of the land and the land taking care of you is really, really important. And so we create an edible garden all the way running through the project where people who are at the end of life can look after the garden, and then in turn, the plants also look after them by providing them nourishment. It also gives them activity, it allows them to engage with the community and to work with others. And then the final concept we talked about is bed to bay, that even the bed can get down into water. This becomes a series of moments for us. So this is the ocean pools, one of the most important experiences. We can get all the way out and sit all the way at the edge if we want to and just look at the sunset in the water. Or if we're not that comfortable, we can also sit further back if it's controlled by the architecture. We can descend down into the water and go out to the spiritual space and sit there. Or if we don't want to, we can also just sit and watch others do that too. It's important for anybody, any situation, to be able to choose how they want to engage with it, but still have that beautiful moments. This comes to the idea of degrees of connection. So everywhere in the project, you can see and engage with other elements of life. So this is that kiosk where after you've had your shower, you can go and get coffee and ice cream. But you'll notice from the kiosk, you can see people going out here to the bridge, which is this father and daughter going out to the edge condition that we have over there. We can also see them from the restaurant. And then when we get out to this place here, where we see two people sitting, we'd be able to see the spiritual space sitting out there. The point being that you as an inhabitant have the opportunity to choose not only what you want to connect with, but who you want to connect with. If you want to be surrounded by lots of people because that makes you feel better, to have lots of life around you, you can. If you want to have a quiet moment with a drink celebrating your lost friend, you can. Or if you want to be by yourself with the family member up top, you can. It's totally up to you and your choice. And this is that spiritual space sitting out in the water. Again, the idea being that everybody's welcome and anybody, regardless of spirituality, can go and enjoy it. Which leads to the competition submission panel. That was the final submission. From there, artificial intelligence, we continue to push that with this idea of manifesting meaning, where we can continue to add more meaning, or we can add the meaning that was there but not shown into the work. So this is an example. In order to create this perspective, we use Photoshop, and this is just a collaging technique, very similar to what students would be using. What we're doing with AI, though, is turning that collage into a video so that we can start to occupy and experience that collage by, and I'll say that again, hopefully you're awake, by layering in that quality of motion, we're starting to bring forward some of the ideas that were already in here, but not necessarily present in the work. The same thing if I move on. This is just an architectural render, a collage, that we're layering in that quality of motion in so we can see what it might be like to sit in the water. This is that spiritual space. What? Actually, and then here we have the life and activation of our project. Cars going past, people swimming, people enjoying and engaging with the project. So, through these three stories, we have AI-enabled agency, AI-enabled speculation, and AI-enabled phenomenology. The question we've asked at the start is, what's next? Where is this going to? We saw over the last year concept making, data optimizing, site plan forming, form generating, and data simulating. And based on what we've talked about through these stories, we're seeing new elements come. We're seeing the development of film. AI is going to be using film. Film can turn our architectural drawings, our collages into near experiential outcomes. We're seeing 3D models and textures coming out of AI, and we can produce tangible, real things that we can engage and interact with. We're seeing augmented reality, virtual reality, live rendering. So inside our renders, we're live rendering. Then we're seeing photoreal environments inside those renders. And then open world simulation, which I'm particularly excited for, is you could imagine your architecture in the center of Daejeon, And inside your engine, inside what you're working on, you would have Daejeon, 2024 version, 2025 version, up to date, and be able to put your architecture inside that so you could experience in real time how your architecture is responding to your city. This is what we will see in the next year. So what does that mean for the future of architecture? Because I want to show you one more thing in order to answer that question, which is metaphorical. So AI is going to master quantitative tasks. Let's have a look at an example of something that's going on right now. Hopefully YouTube works. Looking from the downwards power, cause book like it's king of the porch with a seat in hot. Chance to have some, the trucks got across, and it's dreaming of a man, his teeth they all lost. Artists in the yard, singing knives in a tree, and brands rolled around since he fell from that old TV. This job, triggers lay, the Lannisters starts off fight every day. Everybody's related, it's tangled with the scene. King of the trigger park, that's the redneck tree. Okay. For those who don't know, that's referential to Game of Thrones, very famous TV show. But the important part is that everything you see in that video is AI. Everything. AI lyrics, AI music, AI video. All of it, the whole production is all artificial intelligence. At the moment, we can tell. We can tell that it's made by AI because it's not as good as if it was made by a human. But I promise you, within a year, you won't be able to tell the difference between the two things. Which leads to some important questions about where we sit. The important takeaway from that and from this lecture is that, yes, it's AI lyrics, but it's a human concept. Yes, it's AI music, but it was human curation of that music in order to turn it into the final outcome. And yes, the final outcome is an AI video, but the human outcome, which is the important part, is the emotion that it releases, the emotion that we arrive at because we produce the outcome. So let's look at that in terms of architecture. In architecture, we will have AI exploration, and we've seen this in the students' work today. We have a human concept. AI will allow us to explore that concept, but it's still a human concept. We have AI production. It's going to produce the visuals. It's going to produce the AutoCAD drawings. It's going to produce the models. It's going to produce the renderings. All of the productions will be in AI. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's better. So it has to be done in AI. But it's human curation. Human curation is going to see that these things are done properly, and it's going to see the outcome is what you need us to get. So we might have an outcome of a drawing set. We might have an outcome of a 3D model. We might have an outcome of perspectives. But the human outcomes, the important part that comes away from the architecture, is the much experiential quality guest. So even though AI is helping with the exploration, it's helping with the production, and it produces the final outcome, we are ultimately in charge of what comes out of that. So this is our understanding from the lecture today. AI will deliver better and faster quantitative inputs we can do. People analyze 60,000 generations we saw from Mary Oxford at the start in, a day, a week. It would take much longer for units to do that. It will be able to do all the drawings, all the modeling, everything that we typically do in terms of our production. But what that means is we can focus on the qualitative outputs for our architecture. If AI masters the quantitative tasks, so the production, all the things that have minds see, it means we can focus on the human outcomes. It means we can focus on emotion, on experience, on agency, and creating humane and humanity-centered design. Or in short, it might answer that question of will Gen AI see the return of architectural phenomenologies? So I still don't know the answer to that question. It's still a question that we're going to have to figure out together. But what we will see very much continue to develop is that AI is going to master anything that is quantitative. So that means we have a responsibility. We have an agency to make sure that we're looking after, to make sure that we're controlling the qualitative. We have to control the quality. We have to control the experience. We have to control and make sure we're focusing on the experience for our client, for who we're supporting, and for who the end user is going to be. Our responsibility is the phenomenology of architecture. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Do you have a mind?
but done. It's like body. The focus of the power. It's like as you know, ChatGPT Pro and Computer Journey is on the paid. I think globalization of words make war each other. What do you think about that?
You can ask the question in Korean and if we can translate.
그 AI를 사용하는데 돈이 더 들어가는데 그게 더 후에 양극화를 만들어내지 않을까라는 문제에서 이거를 구성합니다.
Nowadays, we have to pay for the using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So he's asking that if that makes people like who can use that or who can not use that, there will be some separation between them.
Definitely.
What would happen?
Definitely, it's an excellent question, and that's part of what the students were presenting in that film, where 99% of people don't have access, and 1% of people do have access. I'm not a software engineer, so I can't answer it, and I think probably you have to look to the people who are responsible. So OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, all of these companies, their primary target is to make money. So yeah, we might see a world where only people that can afford it have access to artificial intelligence. But if we look at the previous revolution in software, so let's say AutoCAD, Photoshop, all of those, there's still free versions. There's still versions that you can get access to for free. And maybe they're not as good, but you can still access them. So perhaps the answer is we all will have access to something, but whether or not we have access to the best, we don't know. We don't know. Yeah. Okay.
네, 또 편히 질문하면은 네 어떻게든 전달할게요. 왜? 그 Curtin student can answer to in.
Questions? Good students?
네, 모건대 친구들 혹시 질문 없을까요? 그럼 제가 한번 해보면 저는 보면서 좀 궁금했던 게 이게 아직은 그러니까 가상 세계에서의 어떤 이미지를 let me answer this. 그 가상 세계에서 어떤 이미지를 만들어내는 데 노력을 하고 있다면 이게 이제 현실 세계에서 어떻게 건축이 될까라는 의문이 좀 들었는데 그 관계에 대해서 질문을 해보려고 합니다. So like you show in your presentation, there is a kind of that good image, and which is not a real architecture. I feel like that. So do you think about that the gap between the image and the real architecture? It will be coming to the situation or atmosphere, but
Yeah. This is kind of the crux of the question for us, and if we will ever get past focusing on image. So over the last 20 years, we've seen a massive increase in a focus on aesthetics because of Pinterest and Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. They're all based on the image, right? Most of the time, people have never even been to these buildings that they're sharing pictures of. And so it becomes about the hero image. It becomes about celebrating the image of the architecture rather than the experience of the architecture. So the question becomes, will AI get so good at making images that we don't care about images anymore? And then we come full circle back to the other side of now we only focus on emotion and on experience. So I'm optimistic. I think that the pendulum swings of time. We've gone through this phase in the last 20 years where all we care about is the image. But if humans can't make the image because AI will do it better, then probably the reaction is going to be, well, AI can't really think about human agency, can't really think about human problems or human experience. So we, as architects, we're going to focus on experience. We'll leave imagery up to AI. We'll focus on function. We'll focus on emotion. We'll focus on experience. So that's my prediction.
It's very, was it? You are oh, do you foresee AI being able to eventually, I guess, gain more depth with regards to specific combinations of architectural elements, like new ways of using materiality, new ways of creating joinery and these sorts of, I guess, practical solutions, or how do you, I guess, foresee that development?
Great question. So we talked about this a little bit last year, the idea of difference between derivative and definitive. So artificial intelligence, how it works as a large language model, is a lot of data, a lot of information is put into the model, and then very, very, very quickly, it's going to test different options, different outcomes. You don't see that behind the scenes, but it gives you one option. The challenge is that is always, by definition, going to be derivative. It's going to take some existing thing and give you a version of that, a variation of that. Whereas I would argue humans, because we're not as smart, we are capable of making lots of mistakes. But through the process of making mistakes, through our evolutionary traits, we tend to innovate through that process. So if we go back 100,000 years, million years, creation of fire, right? How many things were they banging together before eventually they figured out this is where fire comes from, through trial and error? I would argue that artificial intelligence doesn't do trial and error. It just tries to find from existing pools of information, this is one potential solution. Whereas humans will make lots of mistakes and eventually will come to a thing that hasn't existed before. If it hasn't existed before, that's when it becomes definitive. That definitive thing will then be added to the resource pool for AI, but it means AI will always be one step behind that human innovation. It might take us longer to get there, but as creatives, we can innovate, we can continue to be definitive. So to answer your question, yes, we're going to see AI learn about joinery, about materials and how things go together, but AI can't feel, right? Even once we get to general artificial intelligence. So at the moment, does everyone understand the difference between specialized and general artificial intelligence? No? Okay, so at the moment, how AI works is it's special artificial intelligence. It's incredibly good at one thing and terrible at everything else. Incredibly good at one thing. Humans, we are average at many, 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 many things. So what happens is, at the moment, artificial intelligence is way, way, way up here for one thing, but it can't do all of the other things. Where we're going to get in the next 5 years is general artificial intelligence, where it's amazing at everything. And then we have celestial beings that are way beyond our intelligence, can do absolutely everything. But the one thing they can't do, even if they have general artificial intelligence, is feel. They can't feel, can't intellectualize feelings. So again, it comes back to phenomenology and experience, is this is the thing that humans can do that AI can't ever do. Thank you.